Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at Fatigue Haven again. Fatigue Haven hasn't really had too many updates over the course of the current meta, as there hasn't really been a lot of need for it. It still performs really good against aggro decks and still struggles against rune decks. It's really the only crux to this deck is if you run into decks that are quite slow, you will struggle in your late game typically, but if you run into decks that are quite strong early, you'll usually beat them out pretty easily, and that seems to be the pattern for this deck for sure. The only real adjustment I've made is adding Fox of Purity and adding a single Iron Fist Priest, just for extra pressure early on and extra removal mid-game, which is kind of what we need in this deck typically. Otherwise, the top end basically has stayed the same overall. Lapis was dropped to 1 to make room for the Iron Fist, and Bellringer was dropped to 1 to make room for Fox of Purity, while also dropping just 1 dose of Holiness. I found I just didn't really need that many of it all the time. So overall, this deck is still pretty strong when it comes to those aggro matchups and mid-range matchups. Really only struggling against Rune. It seems to be the only deck that I just can't get a grip on most of the time, because if they do get to turn 10, they kind of just drop the Kakaitis combo, or they just drop a bunch of Kuns, and you just can't deal with them. And it becomes really difficult to just repeat deal with it over and over while they're hitting you in the face for 10 plus damage. So we're going to get right into it and check it out. So first up here, Sword. Again, one of the more favored matchups overall. We are only playing in Ruby group. We get some variety of Topaz to Sapphire players typically when in Ruby group. For whatever reason, the matchmaking groups have become wider, so it seems like you're just going to be matched up against people a bit more randomly. There are some times when I'm playing in Ruby and I'm matched with a Master. That happens. There's really not a lot you can do about that, unfortunately, with the current meta and the current state of the game. So against Sword, you're really just building that early game, throwing down some defensive tools and dealing with their boards continuously. While the aggro slash mid-rangey style swords now mostly focus on going wide more than going fast a lot of the time. Although they still do go quite fast if you leave anything up, so you are forced into removing everything they play, so they can't continue to just hit you in the face repeatedly. And this deck handles that sort of thing pretty well, having a lot of good removal options and being able to stack their own hand quite easily. Never really burning through too many cards all at once. The opponent goes to their own Apollo here. Interesting way to clear, but works out fine for us. Dose of Holiness does become a very easy clear here, and leaves us with the extra 2 points to drop the Tiger. So it's really just maintaining our health total and maintaining our board presence. And as long as we do that, we're always going to be pretty well off. So we do get a pretty easy clear here. We can just buff this +1/+1, put it over the 4/4 and take it out. No issue at all. Like I said, you're really just holding board presence, making sure your opponent can't play anything too crazy, and dealing with everything possible. Luckily for us, our draw did pick up Waters. Waters lets us clear the ambush, no issue at all. And allows us to take care of that. Plus we can even give it a little bit of a buff this turn while throwing down our draw. Puts us in a really nice spot, especially going into turn 8 here. They do end up evolving the Paladin, which for us is a really good option. Since now we just play Jean and we clear, while setting up our Tiger with some extra health. Drawing our second Jean as well, also really good. So we end up with a 6/8 and a 6/6. Not too bad, and a pain for this Geno to handle, as they can't full clear without evoing, which they do end up doing. Basically setting me up to Gene them again. Basically just a retaliatory Gene here. Plus we can buff it, which doesn't take it out of Geno range on its own. It will have to be evoed if we want to keep it out of range, but I decided to just leave it. We'll hold our evos for as long as we can. Unfortunately for us here, the only real option we have is Apollo unless we draw well. And these draws aren't great, and then we do end up picking up the water, so the very last draw for turn, we pick up water, giving us a very nice clear here. Otherwise, it would have just been an Apollo clear, which is fine. So try and spread out our stats a little bit, just in case they can easily take it out with something like this Bane. And then we see the Zirconia come down again, this time being played with a couple of bodies. Really not any issue for us to deal with here. We don't even need to use an Evo, really. We can kind of just ping this away and hold off our turns. And with just one card in hand now, with their draw, they're really no threat to us. We should be able to pretty easily stabilize out and just kind of play what we want and maximize as much of the damage as we want. So I decided to take that out and then just go face. We're looking at a pretty nice turn. Now they could have cleared 2, but at this point they did just give up. They're just like, I guess they didn't want to deal with this anymore, and I don't blame them. When you're facing down a deck with a bunch of cards in hand, and you have 1 or 2 cards to play, sometimes it's just not worth it. So I can see why that guy would have conceded where he did, because his chance of winning was nearly 0 at that point. Especially after burning through so many resources. So this is one of our not so great matchups, Rune. Rune is typically way harder to deal with. So you have to get pretty lucky with just them not having the nuts, because if they do, you are just kind of screwed. So we end up going for the early ward. We still have things like Pact in our backhand here. Unfortunately, not a lot going on until at least turn 5 with water. So we're really not going to be doing a lot unless we pick up a nice draw. Lucky for us, Rune isn't really doing anything too crazy early on. But I do expect to see Anne and Greya pretty soon. Like I said, not doing a lot. We're basically just going to be passing now. Until we can do something kind of impactful. Unfortunately, this Anne and Greya is kind of annoying. It really does put some pressure on us here, so I end up just going for water. If I leave up the Anne and Greya, taking 6 damage to the face is just a little too much, honestly. It becomes a real pain to re-heal it and then have to deal with the boards that they can keep putting up turn after turn, especially as we see something like Demonic Call come down. The wider they can go, the harder it is for us. Fortunately, they leave an empty board, which is great for our turn 6 play. Being able to just play Unholy Chalice to the board. Another Anne and Greya. It's such a powerful card, honestly. I end up just full clearing since we can just drop the ward that'll recur the amulet. They end up just Williaming in response, which I guess is fine. Especially with William Evo. They want that extra spell boost. They're really trying to set themselves up here. Lucky for us, Lapis is a really nice clear here, even with its normal Evo. I don't have to use my Super Evo, which makes it more likely they're going to kill it anyway, but it's also a target if I did Super Evo it, so they were going to probably get rid of it no matter what. And yep, as we see, Seraphic there. Not surprised. And there's our first declimb. So they obviously didn't have too crazy a hand, but that was a pretty low cost declimb, and now they get to just keep playing cards. Lucky for us, this Chalice here is kind of our saving grace, as we can wipe pretty easily with it. Especially under a Sacred Griffin Super Evo. So the Chalice will end up proccing, won't kill our Griffin thanks to Super Evo, and then we can hit them in the face for 9. And since we know we're getting our summon next turn, the odds of us being able to win in the next turn is decent. Although I do end up seeing the double Demon Call, Demonic Call, giving down with the Kun. It's possibly almost the worst outcome possible here. The only thing worse would have been if they had one more Demonic Call. But fortunately, we'd already seen them play it earlier. Because that would have been an OTK. Which would have been brutal. And this is still very bad.
Without suffering, there is no glory.
I kind of have to commit pretty hard here to just live. And lucky for us, this should do it as far as living. Especially with these trade-offs here. We managed to keep some of our board alive. While being on very low health, we do just die to a Kun, so if they have it, they have it. But they don't, they end up just dropping a Ruler of Cocytus. They do send an Evo on it, which is fine, it's not really an issue. And luckily for us, Jean does just win us the game. A second Darkhaven would also have won us the game there, but hey, that's all we needed was 10 damage. And last but not least, we have a dragon matchup. There's a decent mix of aggro and ramp dragons on ladder. This deck can handle both pretty okay. Aggro typically is the better matchup for this deck overall, although dealing with double Forte back-to-back can be a little bit traumatizing. Not something you want to have to deal with all the time because it is pretty brutal, no matter what. But overall, yeah, I think I'm quite comfortable with this deck for the most part. It does the job I want it to do. It's just a pity that Rune is so prevalent at the moment. With how prevalent Rune is, it's really hard to have a decent win streak with this deck because you come across a single Rune player and your odds of winning drop through the floor. It's just not a deck that can handle what Rune does, typically. Like in that last match, if they had the Kakaitis combo, we were probably dead. Fortunately for us, they didn't have it, but that tends to be how it goes. So I was actually meant to play Apollo that turn and accidentally dragged Bellring into the board. Just a small misplay that does kind of end up working out in our favor here. Like, not the end of the world, but hey. I would have preferred to have just wiped their board and then had the fires come down. But this ends up working out alright. We get the full clear, we develop our board, we get a boost on the Tiger, and we hit him in the face for 5 damage. Like, pretty good turn. Can't be too upset by that. Draconic Berserker gets hit the board though. Probably one of the better clear cards for turn 4s, turn 5 plays. It and Priest are probably two of the strongest as far as like single target removal. With a Super Evo mass removal effect. I almost want to say the Dragon's better though. Just because Banish isn't that relevant at this point. There's only a few decks where banishing all their low stuff is kind of worth it. Like into a Cerberus play or something, or into a big puppet play, but those are very late game plays compared to, you know, the value you can get out of an early game clear. So Unholy Vessel here, we get to kill everything. Why not? Take them all out. And then we see Forte, my absolute traumatizer that I have to deal with now. So he gets hit me in the face for 8, puts me on just 10 health. I do have to now answer this, which is really unfortunate. Unholy Vessel being my only option, and at least I do get to heal for 1, so that does give me some solace, you know, we get a little bit of heal. And second Forte. Probably the worst outcome. Double Forte is not what you want to deal with, especially as they develop a board. Lucky for us, we're in a spot where we can full clear this and heal. The dose of healing here was huge. So we're going to use Dose. It's going to heal us +1, and we get to clear Forte while leaving up a ward. This should now be pretty hard for them to deal with. Fortunately for us, we just ended up 1 away from Warrior of the Deep. Not something I initially expected when that happened. But fortunately for us, it's not going to matter. Even if they have a second Warrior of the Deep here, we are going to be able to out-heal it to 7. Plus we're setting up our wards and hitting him in the face. And I even set up clear for next turn. Which is more than enough to force them to concede. So overall, Fatigue Haven still does its job. It does pretty well against those aggro decks, as you'd seen. Kind of eats them alive, honestly. More often than not, I'm always winning those matches. It's very rare. Usually it's only if I brick hard on a board removal against Sword that I don't win those matchups. But it really struggles in the longer game plays of decks like Portal and Rune, where you're kind of just screwed once you get to turn 10 plus, but they can drop really big plays on you. Fortunately, it's a deck that I kind of just fall back to and play here and there, kind of like Ramp Dragon, where I enjoy the deck. I think the deck is fun. It's just unfortunate that the current climate of decks doesn't allow them to operate at their full capacity, where you're either being aggro down really fast, where a deck like this might shine, but Ramp Dragon can kind of suffer, or you're facing things like Rune, where this deck really suffers, and Ramp Dragon can kind of do okay and hold its own. It's really just rock, paper, scissors at the moment of this kills Sword, Rune kills this, and then Sword kills Rune, and you kind of got like the triangle of decks where you're kind of screwed. You can play one deck, but if you get forced into those other decks, you're kind of brutal. I still think aggro is probably the best way to climb overall compared to playing something like this. But if you do just want to kind of shut your brain off and play like one card at a time, you can play this, or you can play Ramp Dragon, and they do okay. Averaging is somewhere in like the 50% range of win rates from the decks that I've played so far. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and until next time guys, see you then.